Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. So, thank you guys for joining us this evening. Remember to share, share, and share. Share this great conversation with all of your timeline and with all of your friends. So, let's just remember to do that. We're going to go around as we usually do on every Monday night, and we're going to introduce all of our great panelists that we have here with us, these esteemed doctors who keep us very healthy. We're going to start with our very own Dr. James Miller, the man who said that I threatened him to be here, but he is always on time. Dr. Miller?
Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be uh, here this evening, and thanks to Nikki and the Congressman for providing this platform for us to come and to discuss different topic and issues that are affecting our community. Because it is our aim to do whatever we can to answer question and to give the information that's going to make our community a healthier and a happier community. And as Nikki has said that health is wealth, so also you'll be a wealthier community. So because we'll be spending less money on healthcare costs if we do those things. So
Awesome. Simply fantastic. To my coworker and friend who is here, our very own Dr. Douglas Graham. Dr. Graham?
Hey, thank you, Nikki. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the Chicago area for many years. After retirement, I went to Washington, D.C. to work with Representative Danny Davis and his office to help with legislation. It's an honor to be here, and I'll try and answer your questions if I can.
Fantastic, fantastic. I see Michelle Garrison is here. Good evening, Michelle. Mary Ballinger is here as well, and she says, "Greetings, everyone. So good to see you all." So good evening to the both of you. To Dr. Tony Hampton, that weight loss guru that is here with us. Dr. Hampton?
Dr. Hampton, family doc, south side of Chicago with Advocate Aurora Health. Excited to be here as usual. And what I found is that my patients, like every time I go to clinic, it's like I'm starting all over again because there's so much to learn. And people, you think you've shared a message so many times with people, and then you meet a new person or even a person you've been talking to, and you have to reiterate an old message. So I think part of what we want to do here tonight is to keep emphasizing messages of healing so that if you didn't get it last time, you'll get it this time. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Outstanding, outstanding. Curtis Jones is here, and he says, "Good evening, everyone." To the man who says he is the real chef, and his claim to fame is to one day be on Iron Chef. That's our very own Dr. Pete.
Hey guys, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm an internist, HIV provider, public health specialist. Happy to be a provider at Near North, and just want to help and share to Dr. Hampton's point, just that there's so many messages that I think our community either it kind of goes over their head or they have so many other competing things to deal with that they don't always get the sort of takeaway message in terms of taking care of themselves. And so I think I want to thank the Congressman and Nikki for providing this platform to make sure that people are doing some of the more basic things to improve their health.
GaryMasonMD@gmail.com. I don't see it.
Oh, thank you so very much, Dr. Pete. Thank you for that. And the man who makes this all possible for us, as always, all the time, that's our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Oh, but right before the Congressman comes, I see that Dr. Maya Green has popped in. Dr. Maya Green, go right ahead on and introduce yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Dr. Maya Green, just community advocate, excited to be among so many brilliant community care providers in all our aspects. And thanks to the Congressman. Thank you, Nikki, for having me.
Well, let me just thank all of you. This is going to be a tough week for legislators because this is a week where so much of what we call the vision for the future of our country is going to be decided certain things about. Uh, it's a crucial week for the House of Representatives. We are looking at a debt ceiling and whether or not we raise it, because technically what that really means is that if we do not, we will be in default. It's almost like uh, going bankrupt in terms of your regular being. Because what we will have said is that we have overspent unless we make sure that we're under or not above the ceiling. And there are those who don't necessarily want to do that. Plus, all of the bills that we've been talking about are on the line. We're actually debating the infrastructure tonight. And there are those who are suggesting that they don't want to vote for an infrastructure bill unless we also vote for a $3.5 trillion budget for next year. Our budget is going to actually run out September the 30th. And unless we do something, it really means that we don't have any authority for the federal government to keep spending money. So it's kind of a critical, hard-nosed week coming up. But we had a great weekend. We had our recovery walk with about 400 people out walking and talking about behavior health, individuals who are in addiction, individuals who are trying to overcome addiction. We heard some great stories and testimonies of people saying that they had been clean for 20 years, some had been clean for 15 years, and some had hit rock bottom, but had also risen out of the pit. You know, the philosopher says that man has the capacity to fall to the deepest hell and yet emerge and ascend to the highest of heights. So I'm excited about our discussion this evening. I was fortunate to hear Dr. Terry Mason and Dr. Brett on Sunday morning, even as they talked with individuals in Arkansas. And so anytime anybody mentioned Arkansas, that kind of raises my interest level a little bit. And so I was fortunate to be able to do that before getting off into all of the other things that I did on Sunday. We had a wonderful discussion with the Speaker of the House of Representatives Sunday afternoon down at the South Loop Hotel, and a group of political activists and interested people. So I'm looking forward to a great discussion this afternoon, and I'm going to shut up so we can get moving.
Okay, want to say hey to Yolanda Williams, who's here with us, and Curtis Jones says, nice hat, Dr. Pete. Yolanda Williams is here, and she also says that she loves that hat you have on just as well. Bobby, Sister Bonnie is here, and Linda Johnson is here, and Linda Johnson is saying good evening to everyone. And of course, Dr. Pete Thomas is saying, Dr. Pete Thomas is saying thank you to everyone on that fabulous hat that he has on. I see Dr. Mason has finally got in. Dr. Mason, go right ahead and introduce yourself to the people here.
We can't hear you, Doc.
Should be able to hear me now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, good afternoon or good evening. And thank you, Congressman. I know you've been working busier than a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest trying to get things done in D.C. with what I've been hearing just back and forth. And we want you to know that we truly appreciate the work that you're doing trying to put these things together. And the real mess is about to start. So, and I'm grateful that you are there to help bring sanity to that whole discussion. And I'm prayerful that you will prevail.
We will try to do our best.
Yeah. And so you had some questions, Nikki, we were supposed to do, and then we're.
Oh, sure. We had made a few promises on last week. We know it got really hot and everybody wanted to hear Dr. Mason finish that conversation, but we promised that we would grab these last three questions that we had on last week. And one is schizophrenia hereditary?
I'm going to leave that to one of my internal medicine colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Maya Green looks like she's trying to unmute herself so she can answer. And she's still muted.
We can't hear you, Maya.
There we go.
So there is a component where they show genetic factors may come into play. When you look at schizophrenia, usually people find out after they had, an episode or something that the first time it's happened. But there are some genetic factors, but without genetic factors, people have been known to be experienced or be living with schizophrenia, and they don't have factors. Also associated with schizophrenia are things like history of trauma, and childhood. It sounds like there was hot topics, including substance use disorder. So, that does play, not necessarily play a factor, but it is found often along with schizophrenia. But to answer the question, there literature does show that there is some genetic link. There can be a genetic link. Whereas if someone in my family, my mom, dad, sister, brother has been diagnosed with it, I'm more likely to be diagnosed. But we do have people where no one is diagnosed in their family, and they've been diagnosed and are living with schizophrenia. So it doesn't negate it. I hope I answered it.
Yeah, that's great, Maya. The other thing I would just add to that is that we typically see sort of a bimodal distribution of it. So people will present in their 20s and 30s, or they can present later in their 50s and 60s. And so sometimes you have people that present later in life, and probably those are the people that have more environmental, their cause is probably more environmental. And the people that present earlier, like in their 20s and 30s, might have a predominant genetic predisposition.
Well, let me ask a question because I know people who are absolutely diagnosed as being schizophrenic. When you are in public space, you quite frankly attract all kinds of people, and all kinds of people kind of seek you out. They also attach themselves. And some of the individuals that come in contact with our office are very intellectually intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And some days they're one person, other days they are a different person. They know all kind of things that you're just totally shocked that they know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there are other times when they're off into kind of never land. I mean, and then tomorrow they may contact you and they appear to be right here. And it's amazing to me that they manage to survive and manage to hang in and somehow or another do all right. And you wonder how. And so they're certainly mysterious to me. And I think some of the people that I'm making reference to, Nikki even knows them. They know Nikki. She may not know them, but I'm saying they know all kind of things about whatever they decide that they want to know about, and somehow survive for long periods of time
Hmm.
and do all right.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I think you said it best. Living with schizophrenia, which literature is beginning to show is a chemical imbalance, has chemical imbalance components to it, and basically imbalance of neurotransmitters like chemicals that our brain uses. Neurotransmitters move from one nerve to the next, to the next, to the next. There are some called dopamine that help us to feel good. There are others to help us to be kind of more aware, help us to calm down, help us be excited. And sometimes, if those chemicals go in a shift, that's not a balanced ecosystem in our brain. We experience things like schizophrenia and sometimes bipolar disorder, right? What Dr. Pete, and I almost spoke on it, but what Dr. Pete elaborated so well on was something called a break. And Dr. Pete talked about a bimodal distribution. Well, sorry, a two-pronged experience along a lifetime of schizophrenia, where some people experience it when they're younger, and a lot of times that's called a first break, and then first psychotic break, and then in the future someone experiences it. A lot of times that second episode is when kind of people are used to one routine for decades, and then something happens in their standard. I wake up every morning, I get my cup of coffee, my jacket's in the same place, my toothbrush in the same place, and then all of a sudden I move to a different place. It kind of throws them off, and then kind of they enter into that, uh, which explains, which, as you said, Congressman, does not have any weight on how intelligent a person is, right? Has no weight on it. In fact, a lot of times people who are living with schizophrenia, before they have their breaks, and because of like social experiences, after they have their breaks, they go through a period of isolation where they're isolated socially. So they do seek out information in books, research, things like that. And they are reading and studying because, again, a lot of times these are very intelligent people. But that imbalance, the chemical shifts, I will say, because sometimes to me, chemical imbalance, even though in literature quotes it, may sound kind of stigmatizing, like imbalance, but the chemical shifts cause that. So if I get a lot of dopamine, I'm up, I'm happy. If I'm missing my dopamine, I'm down, and that happens in the course of schizophrenia. It also happens in the course of someone living with bipolar disorder, and it also happens in something that it sounds like you all already discussed, substance use disorder. So it's all a game of the balance of the chemicals in the brain and how they impact that person and what that person is experiencing at that time.
I'll add that if you listen to my colleagues, there's a lot of conversation about chemicals, and a lot of people are frustrated with behavioral health treatment because the goal is to target neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, norepinephrine, things like that with drugs. And And absolutely, for some people who are fortunate enough to have the right kind of chemical imbalance, the drugs will help them. The reason why the drugs are not effective overall is because the complexity of our hormones and our neurotransmitters is beyond the scope of one type of neurotransmitter. So I've had the pleasure of talking to another brilliant person. Her name was Amber O'Hearn. Now, she had bipolar, and she was able to control her symptoms with diet by reducing, a lot of up and down foods. Up and down foods are your sugars and starches and things like that. And so she used diet to treat her bipolar, and it was way more effective for her. And these are anecdotal examples. They're doing research right now. And they've done tons of research on using a keto diet for behavioral health reasons. And if you just search, not Amber Hearn, but like keto diet for mental health or for schizophrenia or bipolar, you'll find studies. There's another, so that's one way to deal with it beyond the medicines. The other way, I had the pleasure of interviewing a guy by the name of Matt Janes, and Matt Janes actually uses diet to either stimulate or inhibit the sympathetic or the autonomic nervous system, which are also found to be linked. So what we're finding is that diet may be the biggest way to deal with mental illness. You can only imagine how you feel when you eat the wrong foods, maybe the wrong thing for lunch. You know how tired you feel, you know how irritable you feel. Imagine if you have mental illness on top of that, and then you're eating foods that are not going to stabilize your hormones and your neurotransmitters, which is why we believe that this approach works. So I'll probably share in the comments a couple of conversations I've had with people about this, but understand that the answer to the question, as is the case for many of the things we talk about, is probably not just medicine. And at the minimum, if you use a lifestyle approach in addition to the medicines, you'll probably find that the medicines are more effective. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think people are hopeless, looking for an answer. We want to provide answers, which is why I'll share that information, even though that's not our focus for tonight's discussion.
Yeah, I'll just add to all the things that my colleague said. I agree with everything. Just to give some clarity, so some of those chemicals that Dr. Hampton and Dr. Meyer mentioned those chemicals are responsible for making us feel either happy or sad or mellow. And when they are inappropriately present, which means if you have a loved one that died and you're sitting there busting out laughing, well, that's inappropriate, right? And that probably means that there's a chemical imbalance that's going on, either from one of those disorders, bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and there's all kind of different levels of those disorders. And so it's just the imbalance of those chemicals that could come from either a genetic predisposition, meaning your genes, mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, or environmental exposures. And I think the environmental exposures is what Dr. Hampton was mentioning, is these nutritional deficiencies that we know nutrition works, right? We keep leaving it out of the discussion because it wasn't a big focus when we took our medical boards exams and all the rest of that. But it's a big factor. It really is. And so hopefully, more providers will begin to talk about it. But they don't talk about it a lot because they really don't know a lot about it, to be honest with you. What we learned about was, here, take this pill, and this pill is going to help balance out those neurotransmitters.
Well, fantastic. Simply great. Sandra Rowe has a quick question. She says, why won't physicians diagnose teens with schizophrenia when all of the signs and symptoms are there?
My family practice colleagues handle that one. Maya, you're on mute.
I was saying, can you say it one more time?
Why won't physicians diagnose teens with schizophrenia when all the signs and symptoms are there?
I think usually, so I believe in the DSM, and I will look at it. Schizophrenia is generally diagnosed in adulthood and not
Yeah,
in childhood, and typically that like not fast break, psychotic break,
it's the
usually
older.
in the like 20s to 30s, but not people like 12 to like in their teenage years. So
And,
I
and
will. Okay, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, I mean, and like we always say, our patients don't read our textbooks, so it doesn't mean that you know there can never be a person that's not going to develop before the mid-20s. And guess what? They're not going to have all the classic symptoms that other people have. We know, like African Americans, our expression of depression is different than other cultures. And so you can't read the book and think, okay, if this guy has depression, that means he's going to exhibit all 29 symptoms of depression. Absolutely not. Men are going to exhibit different symptoms than women. African Americans may exhibit different symptoms than Caucasians. So I'm just giving the provider a life raft, because it's not always that they didn't make the diagnosis. Sometimes the diagnosis is a tough one to make because they may not have all the whole cadre of symptomatology. And to Dr. Meyer's point, that's typically earlier than when we really began to see first start to see signs of schizophrenia.
And then the other thing I was going to lean into is why it may not be a place we want to go to is like, even though when we're in adolescence, there may be the signs, there may be evidence, there's also things that present like schizophrenia, like is that adolescent, experiencing any trauma?
Mm-hmm.
Is that adolescence experiencing borderline personality disorder? Is that adolescent, experiencing different things? And there are also kind of studies that show there was a period of time when there was an over or later proved wrong diagnosis of schizophrenia in Black boys. And so we don't want to get back to that. So a lot of people that have matured and, become adults, and later on we find out they don't have schizophrenia. They just, it was the category they were put in order for that person, that human, to be processed a certain way by society. It happened more like predominantly in Black boys, so, or Black adolescents. I don't want to use the term boys because during that time they were also, boy was a derogatory term towards them, and so we, for a lot of reasons, I don't know if we are at a point where we can, we want to start going back there. Also look at things like thyroid disorder, and different imbalances that Dr. Hampton is talking about. I was trying to, sorry for being, I was trying to kind of actually look up that article about schizophrenia and diagnosis. And then there's also a high rate of diagnosis in African American people, diagnosis of schizophrenia, sorry, in African American people who experience developmental cognitive kind of delays, coming up in the 60s and the 70s. They were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And then later on, we find out that, they needed learning support, not a sedative, So I will say that.
Outstanding, outstanding. I see Dr. Tony Hampton has put some links in the chat to share with our viewers if they have additional questions. We have a lot of questions coming in from YouTube and via text and inboxing about schizophrenia and different behavioral and mental health instabilities, if I can say that. So we may have to dedicate just a little more time to that for you all, but we did promise to do these 3 questions so we can get back to Dr. Mason's answer. So that third question really is, what are the thoughts of your Yanni saunas on vaginal steaming Is this good, bad, or helpful at all to vaginal hygiene and functioning? And while you guys are thinking about that, to see who's going to answer first, Virginia Knight says, afternoon, everyone. Etna Weatherspoon is here, and she says, good evening, everyone. Uh, Miss King is here, and she says, good evening to everyone just as well. Dorothy is here, and she's saying good evening. So is Audrey Jaycox. She is here as well, saying good evening. Uh, Water Reclamation President Carrie Steele is here, and she says, good evening to everyone just as well. So now, you guys ready to answer? So Dr. Hampton said, no,
we may have
he's
to
ready.
do some
Come right
research on that one. That's a little over my pay grade.
ahead. Okay.
That ain't my pay grade at all.
So let's table that one. I'll do some research on that one.
Wait, Maya
So
has.
Maya, you're muted. She's
Maya.
trying to say something, but you're muted. Go ahead, Maya.
That's something.
Oh, I was gonna say that was my little soapbox right there, and what that little pause to see who all gonna answer my little soapbox, because guess what? Patients have vaginas, so we always have to be ready to treat whole people. That was my little silent soapbox. So, are you talking about the yoni steaming, right? Steaming,
Yes.
right? Okay. So, yoni steaming is not at all new. Let me just say that it's not at all new. And then, however, just like so many other things in when it comes to women, it's not well studied, by like scientific journals and randomized controlled trials and things like that, right? And so what we have on the market right now is all kinds of, like, I can make up something and say this is a yoni steam and then put it on Etsy and then selling it. So what I've been seeing is a lot of people getting into this yoni steaming. And okay, so back up. It's when you take herbs and you put them in a solution. You create a solution out of herbs. Sometimes lavender. You can use cucumber, different things, and you use it to steam the vaginal area. Sometimes you can put it in a pot, have it sit over the pot, things like that. The infusion a lot of times helps to shift the pH of the vagina, which in turn has creates different scents, right? A couple of things, just like so I've been seeing increasingly a lot of patients coming in with things like yeast infections and stuff from yoni steaming. I have patients that do perfectly fine with it. My OB/GYN friends do, a lot of them do not recommend it. More of the naturalist OB/GYN friends do. I do think you should do it in conjunction if that's your choice and if that's what you're going to do for hygiene of that area, of the vaginal area. I do think you should do it in conjunction with your primary care. And if your primary care hasn't kind of gotten up to date on yoni steaming, you can also consult what do you call it? OBGYN. Sorry, OB/GYNs out there, a gynecologist that you trust. The other option that they have is they have yoni bars, and it's more of an insertion and yoni pearls, things like that. So there are a lot of different options. And then they have some herbal teas that you can steam with yoni that they know help with fibroid. The bottom line is there's so many natural products out there. Some of them have been shown, well, from my patients' purview, have been known to kind of be healthy. Some of them use, and then some of them use, I didn't know my friend was watching. Some of some I got to text. Some people just use water. Okay, some people just use water. But do it in conjunction, because some of this stuff just plain is not healthy for the vagina, which is a self-cleaning organism. So douching, things like that, definitely shouldn't go up, in that area. And when you yoni steam, the idea is, for the most part, things shouldn't necessarily go up. It's a warm steam bath that you put your herbs in, and you kind of, in some way, balance over the pot, or if you have the one that inserts in the commode, you can use that one. So Jury's still out. Consult your GYN because they doing garlic and they doing ginger and all kinds of yoni steaming right now. If you just Google yoni steam, you will get a plethora of products out there. And to culminate it, it's a very ancient process with not a lot of current research about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And just as Dr. Maya said, patients have vaginas. Oh, go ahead, Dr. P.
No, I was just going to say, just to relate this a little bit to colonics. I get my patients will come in, ask me about colonics. And, I have to be very honest to say, one, we don't have data on it. And we don't know what are you trying to do? Like, what's your goal? I feel so much better, Doc, when I have one. Okay. You felt better. Okay. But that doesn't mean it changes any sort of health outcomes and reduce your risk of colon cancer. So I think we got to ask ourselves, what's the goal? Like, is the goal for you to feel better? Is the goal for you to feel less bloated? Is the goal for you to reduce your risk of cancer? What's your goal? And then is there any data to show that goal gets accomplished with this? I said, for sure, if you tell somebody, don't eat solid foods for 2 days, only drink liquids and broth, are you going to feel better? I mean, even without without somebody squirting the water in your butt, you going to feel better? Absolutely. So the point I'm trying to make with this is, and again, this is out of my scope of practice, but I'm just immediately asking just basic questions like, what's the goal? And is there any data to show that this actually works to accomplish that goal? Because before you get me to endorse it, I'll just tell you a lot of primary care doctors are going to be reluctant because, especially if it's not well studied, then we don't want to get caught whole in the bag saying, well, you said it was okay. And so our immediate response is going to be, well, what is the goal? What are the sort of the things that can go wrong? Like, I'm always thinking, like with the colonic, I'm always thinking like a perforated colon, right? So I'm not endorsing that because you getting a colonic in somebody's basement or something. I can't endorse that. Like, and so, but as opposed to a colonoscopy that's being done in a hospital setting with controlled environment. So anyway, I don't mean to relate the two, but I just thought about them as I get asked about the colonics more so than I do the vaginal steaming.
After that, I'm just going to go straight to Dr. Mason. That's it. We just shifting straight on.
Yeah, go ahead, Doc.
But that's right. Like she said, patients have vaginas, patients have rectums, and of course, some patients suffer from erectile dysfunction, and they have that male organ just as well. So, Dr. Mason, take it away. Let me know what you need me to do on this side. Once you share your screen, I'm ready to share here.
I've pressed to share, but I don't see it yet.
Okay. Is it a video file? It's a share screen file,
no,
right?
It's a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. So I'm sharing now. I think I need you to share your screen so we can make it work.
All right. Well, I pressed the share button, and I don't see anything happen.
Okay. Let me try another way.
And should I say share screen window?
Yes.
Entire screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm pressing that, although it's not giving me not giving me much of a choice here.
I'm sharing the screen here.
Okay, I got share. I pressed the share on this side.
Wait, Nikki, are you also pressing share?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're the owner of this thing and you press share, it'll stop Dr. Mason from being able to share.
Okay, so when he shares, it's going to ask me to let him share. So if he shares now.
Okay, I'll try that again.
Okay.
I see the share button. Hold on, I got to get back to this screen. Okay, so now I'm pressing the share button again.
Right. And it should ask you a question.
Nope, it's not asking me a question. Okay, I'm sharing a window called PowerPoint. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you want me to click? You want me to? What do you want me to do now? Just click the window button again. The window.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And I'm saying share. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, it sends me a message that you want to share. I tell it yes.
Okay, well, I have it here.
Okay. Well, okay. So we're having a little technical difficulty.
Yeah,
If
these.
you can, Dr. Mason, send me your file. Let me share it on this side. If you can begin to talk about it, then I'll pull it up where it's coming.
Okay, it may be too big to send by a email.
Okay.
Let me see if I can just share it that way. Um, well, this is always what happens, isn't it?
It's okay. It's technology.
Let me just quickly
I've
take this moment.
done this before with Tony. Tony, you got any suggestions here?
Yeah, it's like what you're doing is what should happen. I think Nikki's right. Usually you click share and then it'll say accept and we're done. But there's something going on here. Not sure if it has anything to do with the number of people participating. I'm not sure because it's the same platform I use as well. So it's a little, yeah, we may have to, yeah, let's just see if we can figure this out.
So now I have a window up here. I don't see the presentation at all, though. I don't. I see the window that they asked to share, but it's all you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the window I'm trying to share.
And there's no option for you to give him control, Nikki, right?
Okay.
As Angela
I
Underwood is.
did. I did that once. I gave him control once, and then um, I thought that might have made it easier. And it.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. What can I tell you?
So just try to send me the file.
All right. Probably time we get that, we'll be done. But I will do it. I will do it. I'll have to find the file.
And let me just say what I was going to say. So I wanted to share in the comments a kind of a docu-series that started, I think this past week. It's called Reversed. And in that docu-series, they follow about 4 people who were able to make lifestyle changes to reverse diabetes, which I thought was inspiring for so many people who struggle with that. So I'm going to share that because I think that that's something that is rare that people work with clinicians who actually even suggest that's possible. Only time I don't think it's possible if you're a type 2, it's for type 2, by the way, not type 1, but I had a patient today who's a type 2, and his C-peptide, we measure the C-peptide, which gives us a sense of are we still capable of making insulin with our islet cells in our pancreas. If that number is extremely low or 0, that would suggest that the pancreas has kind of died out, burnt out, and it's not reversible. But for people who do get a C-peptide, which you can ask your clinician to order, and it's in a range that suggests it's still working, absolutely a potential to reverse, or if you're not comfortable with that language, put in remission type 2 diabetes. And it's like a miracle when you can get off medicine. So again, I'll share that link, and maybe that documentary will help inspire people who are tired of being on medicines and let them know that it's possible to do that. I've been very pleased to see people get off medicine on a regular basis, and I just think that's it's like a gift from above. when you're told once, maybe that it's not possible, then it happens, and you're like, wow, I can do this. So I just wanted to share that because I think it's kind of a big deal. It should be on CNN. It should be breaking news, but we don't break this type of news. We only break the news when the latest drug is being put on the market. So yeah, so I'll share that in a moment.
Thanks, man. And Nikki, I did send it. I don't know how long it'll take to get there.
Outstanding.
But
Okay, so I'm going to look for it, and all I'm going to do is repeat that question, how the conversation started, and you guys can chime in while I attempt to pull that up. That wouldn't be a problem. And the original question was, outside of regular eating habits and blood pressure problems, why do men suffer from erectile dysfunction? So that was that question that kind of kicked off that conversation. So
well,
why
Nikki,
is that? Yeah, go right ahead, Dr. Mason.
yeah, this is a big problem. It's not something that is uncommon. Several million men, estimates are as many as over 10 million men have erectile dysfunction. And what we mean by erectile dysfunction is that the penis does not get hard enough in order to be able to have intercourse. And that's all it means. It talks about rigidity. It doesn't talk about anything else. All the other problems, there are other problems that men have, but the rigidity or the penis being hard enough to penetrate is the problem. And there's a couple of reasons why that happens. Number one, people always think about hormones, and all that's important, and testosterone's important. But the real thing that's important for erectile dysfunction is blood flow. And what happens is the penis has blood flow that goes in and gets trapped inside the penis. And that is what causes the rigidity. And if some men can remember or look at when they had erections, their erection would almost have a coincident heartbeat. You could actually see the penis move coincident with each heartbeat. And the reason that happens is because the blood goes into the penis and there's spongy tissue in the penis, and it gets engorged in this tissue under pressure. And that pressure is maintained throughout the entire erection. Now, what keeps that from happening? Well, as long as the blood can get into the penis and not leak out, the penis will remain rigid. But if the blood is not able to stay in the penis under pressure, the erection will go away. Now, what causes that? Well, in the presentation I had is a slide talking about a movie, and the movie demonstrates the role of what we call these inside lining cells of our penis and our blood vessels. And those blood vessels have what are called endothelial cells, or inside lining cells of these blood vessels. And if those things are damaged, and we damage them mostly in the presentation, you would see the things that damage these cells and cause them not to function. And so a lot of guys will come in wanting a testosterone shot or wanting this or wanting that, and you'll measure it, the testosterone, it'll be okay. And even then, testosterone plays more of a role in appetite for sex than ability. So you need to have a reasonably good testosterone level, but that's usually, of the many years that I took care of men with erectile dysfunction, that was rarely the problem. Most of the time it was a blood flow problem. And that blood flow problem in the video that I was going to show you would show you that the things that we eat damage our endothelial cells. And the endothelial cells, this inside, like if you took your tongue and sort of, maybe that's not a good example, but if you took your tongue and wiped the inside lining of your mouth, the inside lining of your mouth has cells on it too. And when we eat bad things, it's almost like destroying or injuring those cells so they can't produce what they need to produce, which is a gas called nitric oxide. And this chemical, I should say, makes the blood flow into the penis and helps to trap it in. And that's basically what the erection is all about. So When that's unable to happen, then a man can't get an erection. And without it, won't be able to get it or keep it. And that's really the simple explanation. It's like pumping air in a tire. If you got a hole in the tire, you could pump the air all you want, but if the air is leaking out slowly or as fast as you're putting in, none of the air is going to stay in the tire. You remember that your car, you have nothing that's holding that car up with those tires but air. So it's the air under pressure that gives rigidity to the tire, like the blood under pressure in the penis that gives rigidity to the penis. And so that's what that's what is the issue. Now there are medications that sometimes interfere, not as much as we think, but the main thing is damage to those endothelial cells, and that's caused by the foods that we eat. And those endothelial cells are not only damaged in the penis, but they're damaged in the arteries that go to the heart, they go to the brain, they go to the legs, they go to the arms, they go to everywhere in the body. These same blood vessels rely on on this mechanism being intact in order to protect you and to make certain the blood is able to get where it's supposed to go. When we eat things that are oxidants, think of oxidants like little fires. And when you eat these little fires, they burn holes in things. And when we eat antioxidants, we send in a bunch of little fire extinguishers in order to begin to deal with the damage caused to those endothelial cells and hopefully makes them work better. And so when we eat antioxidants, and those are basically fruits and vegetables, pretty much anything of all colors will provide you with antioxidants. And those things will help protect those inside lining of your blood vessels so they don't get damaged. So think of the damage like a little spark that burns a little hole or damages a little part of the blood vessel. That's what it's doing. And so those are the things that we have to guard against. And we had lots of medications. I recall going to all of the releases of these medications. It's been a while since I prescribed them, but the most popular one people probably remember is something like Viagra. These drugs will not heal the endothelial cells. These drugs will not do that. What they will do is there's a chemical reaction that releases this nitric oxide that goes into the endothelial cell that makes it work so that it helps trap the blood in the penis. What happens is, and I'm oversimplifying this, but what happens is when those endothelial cells are damaged, then they can't make the nitric oxide they need to make. And if they do, they don't make as much. So the medicines that we take, most of those medicines block a chemical inside your body that normally breaks down that chemical that is given to you to help prolong the effect of the nitric oxide in doing its thing. Nikki, I don't know that we're going to get this thing in time because we are really running up against.
Well, it's okay. Just keep going. It's okay.
It's okay. All right. So this would be nice because I have a nice cartoon that shows this. And it also shows when we eat certain foods, we damage those endothelial cells, and some of them get damaged beyond repair. Some of them, as they're trying to heal, or groups of them, as they're trying to heal, create these things that are the things that help block our arteries, most notably in our heart arteries, our coronary arteries. And these things block the blood flow because what happens is that the healing process is what creates the clot, the scab, and the scar that then blocks the blood from being able to flow through the blood vessel, whether that is to the penis, to the heart, to the brain, wherever it is. And so the one thing I was going to show you is that there's a chart. There was a study done that showed that men who presented with erectile dysfunction, often that was the canary in the coal mine. And that these men should be worked up. And I remember early on that many times I was the one that discovered these men were diabetic, and sent them to the primary care doctors to have them evaluated and treated. Or they had other kinds of issues. Maybe they had chest pain when they tried to walk, or they had other kinds of things that Dr. Miller and Dr. Thomas and Dr. Hampton and Dr. Myrene do more treating than I ever will. But it's the same process. These are not different. And what we found is that the impotence was the canary in the coal mine. It was the thing that told us that there was a problem and that we needed to work these men up to be certain that they weren't diabetic or that they didn't have other things like blockages in the heart or things like that. So it was really important to know. And this chart I would have shown you would show you just how often this happens. And so what we do to treat this problem is that, yes, you could try the drugs, these things that are called phosphodiesterase inhibitors. That's just a fancy word for a chemical that blocks another chemical that helps to create the erection. And so this has been the problem. And what happens is and I know men, a lot of people say it can't be that big a deal, but it is a huge deal. It is one of the things that gets to the very core of a man's manhood. That is to be able to sexually perform. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they do. And we have many, 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 many opportunities to have sessions with men. There's a book I was going to show you. The title of the book I wrote back in the 80s called Making Love Again. And I wrote it not just for the men, but for their wives too, or their partners too. And when we think of partners, we have to think universally of partners. So it is something that takes some time to explain. And then for the treatment, what do we do? Well, what happens when you try drugs like the Viagras of the world and they don't work? Most of the time, in many men, they don't work. And you end up with having to do other things. And although I wasn't going to show this, but one of the things that we did, we had a large injection clinic. So we took medications and injected medications into the penis that would create, I can see the slide now. Nikki, looks like you got it, or got it coming. This situation, these particular drugs and the things that were happening, the things that we use, if it didn't work orally, we would inject it directly into the penis with a needle, like you use for insulin. And we'd teach the men how to do it. And if they wanted, we would teach their partners how to inject them with it. But before we did that, we titrated the dose so that the erection wouldn't last more than an hour and a half or 2 hours at the max. Because if it lasted longer than that, it could actually do some damage because it's a drug-induced problem. So that was what we did. And when that didn't work, we would use other devices. There were devices, and what I used to do was to implant these devices directly into the penis that would then be hooked up to a little reservoir that contained salt water. Mm-hmm. And we put a pump deflate valve in the man's scrotum so he could pump up the penis whenever he wanted to and leave it pumped up as long as he wanted it to be pumped up, and have intercourse. Now, all of his sensation, orgasm, everything else was the same. So looks like are you able to go forward, Nikki? Because I could just take you to where we need to go. That's the book right there. You go back one, Nikki. That's the book. You probably can get it for 10 cents on Amazon now because it's out of print. But I did manage to get some copies somebody asked me for. But that was the book. And we wrote this book not only for the men, but for their partners or their wives. We wrote it for both because when the man is not able to function sexually, it creates a strain on the relationship. And oftentimes the partner may think that it's something to do with her or whomever the partner is. And that's not true. It is a problem that he is having. And in the book, when men, what we talked about, when men could not become intimate sexually, many times they removed all intimacy. They wouldn't do anything. All the kissing, the hugging, the caressing, a lot of that would leave, because for many men, if they couldn't complete the action, they didn't want to start it.
Yep.
And this created a lot of problems. So in the book, that's why I had Dr. Karen Taylor Crawford helped me with this book too. And it was really because we had done sex therapy at Loyola University together, couple therapy, and it was real important. And even when the device worked, and even though the men would have a more than adequate erection to be able to have sex, the intimacy oftentimes was not the same. And the woman felt bad because many times women also participate in the arousal of the penis and the creation of the erection. And with that gone and becoming very mechanical, there had to be some therapy. And we had a group that we met with the men and the women to help them understand how to manage this particular process. So this was, and it sounds like a lot because it is a lot. And our goal wasn't just, or my goal wasn't just to give the man something he needed to have an erection, but to help him begin to restore the intimacy in the relationship, of which sex was just a part of that situation. So is that you chiming in, Dr. Green?
No, I mean, I was sitting up because I was like, okay, I didn't know this book existed, or you all did all of this. And, thinking about what we're seeing now in clinics, and how, it may be out of print, but definitely I know right off the bat, I can think of some of my patients who are in a two-person relationship who could benefit from this. So I was like, oh, I never thought that, like, hey, it's a book out there for that, but it really is much needed, I definitely had you, even, how people, we're on here and we're like, oh, we're physicians. You answered a lot of the questions that I know I was going to ask you, but you already answered. Sensation is still the same, even with the pump.
Even with the penile implant or the injection. And we're still using injections to this very day. And we're still doing the pump. I had the distinction of probably doing more penile implants than any urologist in the city of Chicago at one time.
And what about Muse?
Okay, Muse is a suppository.
Okay.
It's a similar kind of drug, but it goes, and what you have to do is, I always tell the guy, make sure you urinate before you do this, because the Muse is $25, $30, $40 per suppository, and you put it into the penis, push the little button, and then I'd have them hold the penis up and roll the penis between their fingers, and so that the drug could diffuse through the inside lining into the chambers that created the erection, so they could still get the erection. Now, their orgasm, none of that stuff is changed. If they came quickly before, they'll come quickly this time. The only difference is the penis won't go down.
Okay.
And so these are things that are, and people underestimate, I think, who don't know, the value of a healthy sex life as part of a couple life. Or, it's very, very important. And so we did this, and that's why we had these groups, and we had these men share with other men. We had the women share with other women, and then we had them share together. Because we did the same thing for prostate cancer, because oftentimes the treatment for prostate cancer left men impotent, because in those days before robotic prostatectomies, oftentimes we cut those nerves that help create the erection. So there was a lot going on, and I have to thank, may her God rest her soul, Sister Sheila Lynn, for actually helping champion this and actually opening up the hospital. We used to have, hundreds of people show up for these meetings and to talk about this and to learn more about it. And my nurse, the nurse that worked with me, Miss Vanessa Spears, she was the one that taught all the men actually how to do perform the injections on themselves. And if they brought their partners in and wanted them to learn, we taught them. And we also told them if their erection lasted longer than 2.5 hours, they should call us. And we found that giving an alpha adrenergic agent, something that stimulates the alpha receptors, which made the blood go down, would be we give to have them take something like Sudafed or something if they didn't have high blood pressure. So I know we're over time, and I apologize that this didn't work. And maybe one time we'll do it and practice it before we get started so that we can make certain that it works. And I thank you
But
for what you've done so far.
Dr. Mason, just keep going, Dr. Mason. You're fine.
hey, Dr. Mason, I can tell you I had a few of my patients who had the implants done by you, and I can tell you they were extremely happy. Just, you kind of gave them their life back almost. So it's amazing. People might think that erectile dysfunction isn't disabling, but it really is.
Yeah.
And so patients felt so grateful for you for that, for all the work that you've done, not just in public health, but in urology. They were just very, very happy,
And thanks, Pete. And I tell you, it was probably one of the most gratifying things that I did in practice to see. I mean, and I don't mean make this sound the way it sounds, but to help keep relationships together, or to take some of that pressure off of a perhaps tenuous relationship. Because I can tell you, it does a lot to the male psyche. I can give you one example of a guy who came in my office, sort of had a depressed affect. He, kind of head down, and didn't want to speak very loudly. And actually, I could tell that he felt embarrassed even being there to even talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And he otherwise he was a very virile, burly looking guy, and this was a major issue. And when we brought him in and worked him up, made sure we didn't miss any of his metabolic issues or like his diabetes or something like that wasn't as controlled as it should have been. Because I send a lot of patients back to internal medicine and family practice who came in specifically for this. But what we wanted to also do, this guy, once he got through, and it's a painful situation for a while, like any surgical thing, you go through a period of pain. But once these guys have started able to use these devices, this man came back with a brand new suit. He had on a new hat. He had on a big gold chain.
Boom.
I mean, I'm serious. I'm really, really serious.
Yeah.
And I tell you, men don't usually complain about much, and they don't like to even complain about this. And they get despondent when they come to your office and you give them whatever oral agent you have, and it does not work. That they're not happy campers. And even when we gave them or taught them how to inject their penises, and we taught their partners how to do it, and we titrated their dose so they wouldn't get an erection lasting more than 2 hours, as I mentioned before. But even with that drug, their sensation, orgasm, everything else is absolutely the same. It's totally unchanged. And it changes, it changes the life of these people and their partners. And it didn't matter whether people, what their sexual orientations were. There are a lot of things I learned about even that going through this process. But it was probably, in the practice that I had, it was probably one of the most gratifying. To your point, Pete, it was one of the most gratifying things. When you saw these guys come back in again, they would tell you, "Now I feel like a man." That's what they would say. And go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Maya.
I know this is not, Nikki, I don't know if we got questions out there. And I know this is not like, hearing you, Dr. Mason, reminds me of being a medical student at the county and seeing you walk through the halls. So hearing this and I have a question. So if you don't mind me asking.
Sure, go right ahead.
So here's a question I didn't understand.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Once a person is, I don't know what that noise is, but once a person is on, is that me? Okay, so once a person is given like a agent to help maintain an erection, after they have an orgasm, if the erection is still maintained, I would think you would go through the stages of build up, plateau, and then orgasm again. If you like initially have if you're a one orgasm person, but the erection is still there, then you can have multiple orgasms. And
Absolutely.
okay, all right.
Absolutely. And I think that what was important about involving the wives
Mm-hmm.
or the partners was that we wanted them to understand that they should not feel less attractive or anything like that, because this was a physical problem caused by his diabetes or caused by whatever was the cause of it, and that is no reflection on them. And after he had reached orgasm, his penis wouldn't go down. It didn't go down till the drug wore off.
Mm-hmm.
And we had it titrated, so they had about 2 hours of time before
Okay,
that happened.
got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
I just
Dr. Nate,
add, if I can, when the procedures as well as the drugs became available, the number of men who began to talk about things that their problem would not talk about it, but began to come to physicians, and we were able to find other problems that was existed because men just wouldn't show up unless something was hurting them in a lot of situations. So now men had something, a reason to present to a physician, and now we are able to evaluate those other flow problems that have existed in other parts of their body that wasn't we weren't getting those opportunities before. And as he said, the amount of gratification, the amount of improvement in their relationship with their mates was just tremendous, and we saw tremendous changes in their their feelings about themselves, feeling good about themselves. And even there, I'm aware of incidents and circumstances where the spouse came to me and said, because of the problem that I was having, I thought my husband was doing something outside of the house, and that was the problem, or that was something about me. And so once these issues was able to be addressed and resolved, I mean, it just changed so much.
No, you're absolutely right, Dr. Miller. Like I said, it's one of the most gratifying things that I ever did in practice. And for those many years that we did that, and even with the penile implant, they got past the point of it feeling artificial and all that sort of stuff, and were able to begin to enjoy themselves as they once did. But the other thing, Dr. Miller, is that we often, because this is a microvascular problem, and because it's an endothelial cell dysfunction issue, we often also sent these men for cardiology workups, because many of these men had underlying cardiovascular disease that was not appropriately diagnosed, because they were seeing, a lot of guys thought I was a primary care doctor. I'm like, no, I'm a urologist. You need to go see these other people. And so when we did this, actually, at the National Medical Association, the African American urologists actually put together a group with the African American cardiologist, or what was the name of ABC, I think was the name of the Black Cardiology Group. And we actually created a protocol that we distributed to all of the other physicians, Black and white, on how to properly evaluate erectile dysfunction. We even had, just because early on the insurance companies gave us a lot of flack about this, so we had to prove physiologically that they had this. And what we did was, what we would find out is that men who had this physiologic problem would lose their ability to have erections at night in their sleep. Usually men get 2 erections or so during what's called nocturnal penile tumescence, nighttime penile hardening. And we actually used to, and it would happen during a phase of sleep known as REM sleep. So we actually had a room where we had an EEG tech come in and put all the electrodes in the head, and then we put the strain gauges around the penis that would measure the rigidity or lack thereof of rigidity during REM sleep, to show that this was a physiological problem. So there was a lot that went into it. And that was done right over there on Polk and Dearborn. And we rented an apartment and to make this happen, and work with the neurologist to make certain that the EEG, that the people did get into REM sleep. So, and there's a little piece of this that's actually in the movie Game Changers, one of the 4 movies. Game Changers has a section where they actually use those strain gauges. Oh, that's the slide I really needed, Nikki. That's one of the slides. That's a slide that's from the JAMA article that talked about how many men complained of erectile dysfunction before their heart attack or before their stroke. And so it was really very important that the docs, oh no, don't go that far, because those are the videos I'm not going to show any, we're going to show any of those things. No, go the other way, Vicky, the other way, Nikki. You don't want those coming out. I don't want congressmen to be getting a lot of mail about what we're doing. And so those, if I had control of the slides, I would have been able to do it. These things to just show the relationship between obesity, diabetes, and that's it. Don't show any more, Vicky. Nikki, you can stop. Thank you so much for trying to get that done. I appreciate it immensely. I know we went over, but if there are questions from the chat, I'd be happy to take them if we have time.
Did Medicare pay for this?
Yes, sir.
You could have been a millionaire. you could have been a billionaire.
I did a lot of them, Dr. Congressman. I did a lot of these.
Billy Jones.
Yeah, well, Medicare paid for it. Yes, they did. It took a while for them to do that, which is why we ended up having to do EEGs and all this other stuff early on. But as it became more accepted around the country, that's what we did. And now we know now that people who then go on plant-based diets will oftentimes have return of some of their erection. Now, I'm not talking about eat 2 meals and it's back. No,
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about make that lifestyle change, because the good thing about the plant-based diet is that it is full of antioxidants, and that's what you need. You need the antioxidants, and nothing works better than dark-colored fruits and vegetables. Nothing works better, and it is why we really still push this sort of thing. Now, you can't serve this man one plate of greens and think he's going to be all that again. That is not the way it's going to happen. And you need to cut out the other things that are causing damage to the endothelial cells. And that's basically the standard American diet, particularly a lot of the processed foods that we're eating are what damage these cells and cause this problem. And I think you're right, Congressman, because now people are eating worse than they ever used to eat. So what if I were in practice, we're probably seeing this problem now in younger men based on the way they're eating. And if we talk, and you always got to talk to the partner because the men lie. So you got to talk to the partner to find out really what's going on, at least with that partner.
So the book, for the 86 people who have chimed in asking where can they find this book at? The book is on Amazon. The book is on Amazon.
And there may or may it's out of
$5.95, and it's Making Love Again.
Oh, you looked it up, Nikki?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so now we have like 93 people asking where could they get the book. So I had to look it up to see if I can find it. So it is on Amazon for $5.95. I know it's probably hard to see. But it's $5.95 on Amazon. Making Love Again, Mason and Norman. They do have some for $2.95. I guess those are used copies that people are reselling that they say are in good condition. But you can simply go to Amazon.com and find it there on Amazon. That was the first place I found it at when I Googled the search, and that's where it popped up at.
Contemporary Books published it, but after that first run, after the first or second run, they didn't publish anymore. And then, because now we got a whole new group of people who this is all new for. And when I do men's talks, they all talk about the prostate and all that stuff. And I tell them that the prostate, and I'll say this very quickly, the prostate's one of the sex accessory organs. And one of the biggest things that men have to get used to when the prostate has been removed for prostate cancer is that over 60, 70% of the fluid that comes out when a man has an orgasm comes from the prostate. It's prostatic fluid. A little of it comes from the seminal vesicle, and the smallest amount of it is sperm. And so that's something else people have to sort of get used to, especially as men have had surgery. Now they're doing it where they're sparing the nerve, and sometimes they don't have the same problem, but it's still a problem that we want people to be aware of. Now, this won't improve your ejaculation or anything like that, but it will make it, and the penis will stay up until you let the device down.
Okay. Well, one of our viewers wants to stay anonymous, but she did share that she said, "Thank you, Dr. Mason. But most importantly, if you're having erectile dysfunction, this means that there are other things happening. So check your heart and your diabetes." And she says, "Thank you. I've made my husband sit here next to me the whole time because this is very important to us. Yes, I'm going to buy the book. However, before we read the book together, I need him to be around." So thank you for sharing. I'm no doctor. I can't diagnose him, but he goes to the bathroom a lot. I have read that may be a sign of diabetes. So thank you, Dr. Mason, for sharing the things that lead to the erectile dysfunction. And thank you, Congressman Davis, for caring enough about your constituents to have something my mother would call a kitchen conversation to save the lives of the people. Thank you. The book is also on Kindle for $8.99 if anyone wants to know. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. I'm so glad that now I know, because I thought, because that was,
well, she shared it.
It was 1986, I think we wrote that book. But no, but thank you. And I want to thank all the listeners, and thank you again, Congressman, because this is a subject that we really do need to talk more about. And I'll say this, the biggest thing I feel bad about not being in practice anymore wasn't so much about doing the implants, but to have what I learned about what was most important. And I'm sure Dr. Miller, you and Dr. P. Thomas and Maya, men don't have a safe space to talk. And what I found was the most important thing about what I was doing is I gave men a safe place to talk, that no matter what we talked about, it never left that room. Not that it would for anything else anyway, but you could make them comfortable enough, because when a man bears his soul about this problem, it ain't much else that could be hid. It's just not. And I am going to redo this. I'm going to do a webinar, and I actually had on the slides a place where they could go to. And I'm going to try and do another webinar where I go through this whole thing, again, showing all the different parts, all the different things. And if they go to, if I can, Congressman, newday77@yahoo.com, if they send me put their email address there, when I do this webinar, I'm trying to see if Pastor Moss is going to let me do it at church. I did it for the men's group at church, but it wasn't overall. And I really thought that it would be helpful for the women too, to understand this, and because they oftentimes are the repositories of information for men, and men sometimes don't always remember stuff well. So I'm grateful that I was blessed by God to be able to have this opportunity to do this and to share this with these men, along with dealing with the other terrible problem that they have of prostate cancer, and dealing with that too.
We'll have a traveling road show.
Okay. Well, Dr. Miller, I think I'm coming to your church soon, right?
You're muted, Dr. Miller. You're muted.
You're muted, Jim. James, you're muted.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
This week we are having a men's conference over at the Rising Sun. Starts on September 29th through October the 2nd. And Dr. Mason will be one of our presenters. And we hope to have a good time and spread a lot of good information. And yeah, again, this is part of healing the community.
That's right. It
Yeah.
absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Right
So
on.
as we go ahead, Congressman.
No, I said right on.
So as we always say on Monday nights, what are our until next Mondays? So Dr. Douglas Graham, I know we only went over a little, but people stayed here and people were really interactive and sending tons of questions and comments and inbox messages. So your until next Mondays, Dr. Graham.
Well, you know, this isn't exactly what we've been talking about, but I need to remind everybody we're entering into flu season, so you want to get your flu vaccine. You want to get it now before they run out, because you don't want to get the flu and COVID, and then COVID then the flu, because then you're really in hot water. Mm-hmm. So talk to your primary care doctor, go to your pharmacy. It's time to get your flu shots now.
Absolutely. Dr. James Miller, your until next Monday.
My until next Monday is just, this is an example of where you can get the correct kind of information. Yeah, so it's important that when you get information about your health, that you get the correct information from the right sources. So until next Monday, make certain that it's the right source.
Absolutely. Dr. Terry Mason, your until next Monday.
I apologize for our delays earlier today, but I'm grateful that Congressman Davis allowed us to go over. And I hope that in some small way, this was of benefit to everyone. And we'll look forward to continue doing. That's why having this show that the Congressman has is so important. So I thank you, Congressman, for this opportunity, and my colleagues for bearing with us as we went through this.
Absolutely, absolutely. To Brad Cummings of the Voice newspaper, Brad watches and he always talks about how great he thinks the show is, but he said we didn't have any women on here. So Brad, Dr. Maya Green was here tonight. He has missed you because September was our birthday month. He wasn't here. And every time he chimed in, he said, there's no women there. Where are the women? So Brad, she was here tonight. There she is. Dr. Maya Green, you're until next Monday.
Wow. Coming back, I'm just really inspired about what I hear in my exam room, what people want to hear. Thank you, Congressman Davis, Nikki, the physicians on this panel, and Dr. Mason for taking me back to roots of, in the middle of this pandemic, some things really, really matter. And sexual activity is a physical thing, but it can be spiritual, it's mental, it's emotional. And I've not seen a congressperson make space to talk about things that community want to hear, but a lot of times are too afraid to ask. I will say this topic and hearing it, and also learning, right? You never have learned so much that you can't learn kind of more. I can think of situations where I'm like, hey, refer this and this and this. Somebody wrote a whole book about it decades ago. What am I doing? And thank you, because I'm about to. If you on Amazon, you better get it, because I'm about to get these for my patients, and they're $9 too. About to get these for my patients, just start handing them out, because I do feel like also it offers patients something where they can hold on to and do research versus that Google research or their Facebook algorithm that may give them, like I think Dr. Miller said, or Dr. Graham, where you get real information from people you trust. And a lot of times people want something tangible, especially in the COVID era where so much stuff is digital. I'm finding people are wanting more tangible books, something to hold on to and things like that. I'm so inspired today. I got to tell you, I'm almost, thank you.
I want to say, remember to mask up, remember to get vaccinated. And for those of you who may need to take an antibody test, which is just a little prick of the finger, get your booster shot. Let's be prepared to stay healthy, wealthy, and wise, because health is wealth. Go right ahead, Dr. Mason.
No, I just want to remind people that
you had your church finger up.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that this coming Thursday from 1 to 6, we're going to be over at the CSO Sports Complex, and we're going to be there with the American Red Cross because we have a severe blood shortage, and blood shortages for all kinds of reasons, surgery, everything. And we desperately need people, particularly with O negative blood. But even if any blood you have, they're going to take. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be donating blood. We're also going to have people getting COVID tests there. All this stuff will be free. So if you can, come on out. It's 1 o'clock. It's right off of 47th and Lake Park from 1 to 6. And I'm going to be donating blood myself. So please come on by. We need it. Our community needs it. Our sicklers need it. Our surgery patients need it. Just so many people need the blood, and we can't make it. We got to give it. We got to give it. So please come out and support it. 1 to 6 at the CSO Sportsplex, right off of 47th and Lake Park, across from the Bennies.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Mason. You mentioned in your comments that our sicklers need it. The congressman did a great platform last week on sickle cell, and it was so in depth, just talking about sickle cell and what we need to do. So remember, I know some of you all saw it, some of you all were there. So just remember, our sicklers need it, and we never know when we may need to have a blood transfusion.
That's
so
right.
Just if you have it, get it. You can remake it. Share just a little bit of that so we can all live longer. As always, we'll have our closing remarks by the man who makes this possible for us to do, the one who is our champion on healthcare and on so many other things, our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District. That's Congressman Danny K. Davis.
The only thing I need to say is that thanks to all of you, I will have the most health-aware constituents in the United States of America. So have a good night, and I better shut down while I still got a ride, because it's 9:30 in Washington, D.C., and I have an 8 o'clock meeting with the Bureau of Prisons in the morning. So have a wonderful evening. Thanks to everybody. See you next week. Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.